Welcome to the Ask JT podcast, where we simplify tax, finance, and business decisions for UK business owners. I'm Justin Turner, an accountant, business owner, and author. I'm going to share practical advice and help you run your business more efficiently and keep more of what you earn. Hi, and welcome back to the Ask JT podcast. In this episode, I'm diving into something a lot of people are curious about, but not many people are doing well. And that's how small business owners like you and me can actually use AI to save time, boost quality, and grow smarter. Now, you've probably seen the hype, ChatGPT this, AI that, people claiming robots are about to take over every desk job on the planet. But here's the truth. AI isn't replacing experts, it's amplifying them. And today, I want to talk you through kind of how I'm using AI tools every single week in my business, what I'm doing with kind of AI tools for clients, for content, and for operations as well. I've got some really great examples to share with you, real stories from real clients, and hopefully this is going to give you the impetus for you to go off and have the confidence to go and try some of this stuff yourself. But also, I want you being better, getting better at using AI technology, because I think a lot of my clients aren't doing it very well and they could be doing it so much better. So let's kick off with an example. My first example is I had a client come in to see me and they were talking about a problem they had in their business. They've got dog daycare, a dog daycare centre, and they need a piece of software to kind of track owners against dogs. If you imagine, each dog's got kind of their own requirements, I suppose. Some of them might be taking medication. Some might have allergies, sort of information that the carers would need to know about the dogs as well, about the kind of their behavioural traits and stuff like that. And one of the kind of key operational issues that they were having is they wanted to offer a discount for anyone who was using 3 or more sessions with them within a week, that they would be entitled to a discount. But they didn't have any software to be able to track this. They couldn't find anything off the shelf. They'd been out to a organisation that helps kind of resolve problems like this, and they'd written them up a requirements document, and the output of that is, I think you're going to have to build something bespoke. And that's where it had stopped. They just were like, hang on a minute, we can't afford bespoke development. But during the meeting with me, I said to them, have you ever heard of Replit? Replit, R-E-P-L-I-T. And it's basically a piece of AI technology that will build you a web app. And I mean, they looked at me as if in utter disbelief and say, Justin, hang on a minute, surely you can't build like a web application using AI. And I was like, yeah, absolutely you can. So I took their requirements document, I fed in a paragraph of information about what they were looking to achieve, and I set Replit away, and it starts thinking about the problem. And it can take quite a while to do it, sort of 20 minutes, half an hour sort of thing. So while I finished off the meeting with them, I just sort of folded my laptop screen down and said, we'll come back and check in on it in half an hour's time when we're finished the meeting. At the end of the meeting, I opened up the laptop screen and the clients were just blown away, absolutely blown away. There was a fully working web application for them. At first, they just thought it was a website that was built. It's showing them a visual prototype of what it could look like. But no, it was a fully working web application. We could go into customer management. We could have dog management, put in the information about the dogs. It was tracking the discounts. It even built an analytics dashboard on the front to show them what income and revenue was likely to be coming in as well. The key takeaway from this is you don't need a development team to start building web applications. You just need curiosity and the right prompts. So I think that's the key message here. One word of warning I will put on this sort of stuff is, at some stage in this process, you will potentially need to have a software developer look over that, because security is a concern and you need to kind of invest time. It's not completely time free. It's not going to do everything for you. You've still got to test it and tell it where it's gone wrong, and it will fix it for you. But at some stage, you need to think about web security when you're trying to integrate payments and things like that. You don't want to get that bit wrong. A very good friend of mine who was, he's worked as a chief technology officer for some quite sizable businesses. I messaged him about this and said, have you tried this Replit thing? It's absolutely amazing. And he came back to me and he said, yes, it is changing the way us as programmers write code. Isn't that interesting? It's not removing the need for them, but it's changing the way that they're doing it. So I hope that first example has helped a lot. The next example I want to talk to you about is about voice cloning and audio content. So I had this problem where I wanted to record my 2 books as audio books, and I've got my 2 books. One of them is quite a thin book. It's called 10 Ideas to Save 10% in 10 Minutes. And the premise of the book is that you can read each chapter in 10 minutes. And it does work on that basis. So the problem I was having is when I would record audio content, a 10-minute chapter would take me around 20 to 25 minutes to record it. But the problem with audiobooks, it's very different to podcasting, I might add. Like breath noises and mouth noises actually in a podcast can give the realism. I'm here, it's my voice, I'm not cheating with a voice clone. But when you're recording an audiobook, you need to actually remove all of those breath noises and those kind of mouth pops and things like that. It is really, really important. And people like ACX, Amazon's platform for audiobooks, are really, really picky about it. Then the issue I was having is the software that I was using. It would take me around an hour to edit the audio. And was I doing a good job? Probably not, if I'm being brutally honest. So I decided it was going to take so long. I had something like 14 sections to this book, the 10 chapters, your introduction, your kind of closing statement, the author bio, all of that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. AI technology's moved on. Surely I'll be able to create a voice clone. And you know what? I was absolutely right. I went off and opened an account with a company called 11 Labs. And because I'd already tried to record the audiobook, I had quite a lot of audio content of my voice. So I fed this into 11 Labs and said, can you build me a voice clone, please? And after, I think it was kind of 3 hours, it had produced this voice clone, and it is remarkable. It's a bit 11 Labs, just to kind of give you a bit of background to my experience with it, is when you're producing long form content, you have to use something called their studio, and their studio doesn't actually produce my voice quite like me. If you go onto my blog at askjt.co.uk, you'll find each of the blog articles is recorded into an audio, and that's produced using the 11 Labs studio. It's a tiny bit robotic, and it sounds a little bit like me, but it sounds like a southern version of me. But actually, it works. And if you compare that, I was on the FT website recently, and I listened to one of their articles using their AI voice clone that they've got. My voice clone is much, much better. That's a big organization in the industry of news, and I can produce something better than they're doing. But here's the amazing thing. They've got this feature called text to speech, and it allows you to produce smaller snippets of the audio of any kind of text into audio. So I use that feature because it produces a much more realistic voice. And I played one of these snippets to one of my clients yesterday, actually, in the office. And I said, "Who's that speaking?" And she said, "It's you, Justin." And that's just how good it is. The disadvantage of the way I did it was I had to break up the audio into smaller segments, and then I stitched it all together into Audacity, which is just a piece of software. But isn't that absolutely amazing? My second example, still on the theme of voice and audio, is obviously I'm doing this podcast as well, and even when I've recorded voice for my audio book on kind of using a voice clone, things like that, you still need to do what's called post-edit production work to it, and this kind of mastering. So I found a tool called Allphonic. which uses AI to do all that mastering of the audio as well. And that's what this podcast will be put through as well. It will help the kind of the levels, it will normalize the audio. And that's where I was running into huge kind of problems with my own kind of editing of kind of the audio when I was recording the books, is I just couldn't get the levels right. And every time I uploaded a file into the ACX kind of audiobook system, it was just being rejected straight away. So kind of these tools again are out there, and again the if you imagine the journey of producing a piece of audio, it can take quite a long time. You've got to edit it, you've got to think about what I'm going to do, we've got to normalize it, we've got to get it passed by the system. Actually using a piece of software like Auphonic is just going to save loads and loads of time. My next example is about kind of, again, staying on the theme of podcasting, is what happens with the marketing of that. Well, one of the things I've done is every time I produce a podcast or a blog article or something like that, there's something called an RSS feed, and I'm using Zapier. Zapier is automation software. If you imagine it detects something, so a new post has been pushed through the RSS feed for either a blog or a podcast. What Zapier then does is it takes that content, so the outline of my podcast or the outline of my blog, and it feeds it through ChatGPT. This is happening all automatically. And it writes a social media post. That social media post is then automatically posted into social networks. And I don't have to do anything, ultimately. And that's where I'm bringing together a theme of kind of automation and kind of AI working side by side, but I don't actually need to do it. I find social media really boring. I'm sorry, there's probably people out there going, how can you say that? But I find it incredibly dull. Producing the content and helping people is where I love doing things. The problem is you've got to get people to look at your content, otherwise what the hell are you producing it for? And that's where I found actually integrating things like Zapier to automatically detect when I'm producing a piece of content, and then it takes that off my hands. That's a bit of a work in progress at the moment, and there are a few things that don't kind of work. The way the link preview, when it comes through into LinkedIn, it doesn't pick it up very well, and I think that's probably more of a failing of the LinkedIn API, which is how you integrate with something like that, an API. But do you know what? At least I'm getting it out there. At least I'm, getting people to kind of do it. And my first podcast proper episode went live yesterday, and the Zap from Zapier ran, no problem at all. It pushed it out onto LinkedIn, and I had a lovely message off a client saying, "Oh, that podcast was really, really useful. We myself and my husband listened to it, and we've taken so much away from it. Wonderful. That it just shows it's absolutely worked." My fourth example is about custom GPTs. And I think this is where the power really kind of lies. I think people go wrong with ChatGPT because they open a free account, they ask a few casual questions, and then they go, yeah, it was all right, but it's not that useful. You're just playing with it. You need to stop doing that. Number one is you need a paid for account. Yeah, that's not expensive. I don't know what it is, something like $15 a month. If you're going to use AI commercially, you need to invest some time in creating what's called a custom trained GPT. And try and think about these custom trained GPTs as like laser-like knowledge in a particular area. And I'll give you a couple of examples about where I'm using those in my accountancy firm. Is every time we do a tax return for a client, we provide them with an email with tax advice in it, basically, with specific scenarios and things like that. It breaks down what their tax is, what they need to pay, when, and it highlights some tax planning points as well. And one of the key things that I find is when we come towards the January deadline, the standard of work can drop away because we're being rushed. Everyone's left it to, well, not everyone, but lots of people have left it to the last minute. So we created this custom GPT based on how we would like our tax advice laid out, also highlighting key standard bits of advice that we would like to give out to most clients. And if they fit into that scenario, then it would put them into the predefined letter that we were writing. So what we do is we basically say we've got a client, we use the first name, for example. So Justin, for example, has a tax bill of this is the breakdown of their income. These are the payments on account, and we press go, and it produces this beautifully crafted written email that's written in our style. It's not written in ChatGPT style. It's been fed with lots of examples of how we write, how we speak, how we communicate with clients, and then it applies some basic tax understanding, and we get this great email that comes out. And one of my clients, she's English isn't her first language. She said to me this year, she said, God, that just in that email that you sent out was absolutely brilliant for me. I don't understand the British tax system terribly well, and it just guided me through exactly what I needed to do, when I needed to pay, and it gave me those brilliant advice points at the end. And yes, we edit it, we check it, we're experts in our field, but we're not spending time writing an email. And it's completely enhanced what we're doing. I've got another one which is about car tax. Believe it or not, I get asked all the time about electric cars. Clients come to me and say, I'm thinking about buying an electric car in my business. I'm looking at let's say it's a Tesla Model Y. What are the tax implications? And I just drop that message, that kind of bit of the extract of the message into that GPT, and it's trained to write up an email and outline all of the tax, what it means for corporation tax, what it means for benefit in kind, and breaks it all out. And it even links in, I've got a YouTube video about company electric cars. It puts the link in for that. I've got some kind of fact sheets about it. It puts the link in for that. It just produces this brilliant thing. And I've done loads of these GPTs over the year, kind of the last 18 months, I suppose. And they work really, really well. I think I've probably got a dozen custom GPTs. One of them's trained on all of the content within my book. So if I'm writing a kind of a blog post, I'll pull together a load of research, I'll drop it in and say, can you create me the outline of a blog post written in my style? And it produces it just like I would write in my books. I mean, absolutely astonishing, really. A little while ago, we were pitched by kind of one of these tax library services. They were wanting to show off their £2,000 a year AI assistant to help within kind of the tax industry. And we were, myself and a colleague were in this demo, and we got to the end of the demo and we said, I'm really sorry, but our GPT that we've built in-house is far better than what you've got there. And in that interest, we've invested a lot of time. And when I say a lot of the time, I've probably spent about 6 hours training that GPT. It's got all of the tax legislation, like the acts of tax legislation. And I've even, as I've trained it, I've asked it which parts of the tax legislation it's well knowledgeable about, what it's not knowledgeable about. I've fed it more information. And then I've taken it from there, and I've given some training to the staff about how they can actually produce better prompts. And I think better prompts, we're not very good at prompting AI. If you look at kind of how you should give the prompts, you should be writing quite a in-depth prompt before you put something into a GPT. Otherwise, you're just messing around with it. You'll find that when I'm prompting my AI, I will be asking very, very specific questions. I will be giving it quite a lot of content. I'll use it for things like today, where I'm producing a podcast to kind of help me pull things together really quickly to kind of create a structure for the podcast. But I'll feed it with a lot of content. I've got a blog post that's going to go in a few weeks down the line about this subject as well. So I fed it with that and said, this is my initial ideas. Here are some examples. Could you create me an outline for today's podcast? And yeah, it'll go off and do that sort of thing. But I'm giving it lots and lots of information to work on as well. So my last kind of point that I just want to talk to you about is, again, turning research into content instantly. I think over the last, few years, I've had this dream of creating an education business and it's here today at Ask JT. And we've dabbled with things like e-learning products, and they've not really worked very well. And actually, one of the problems I was seeing is that we were putting our contents behind a barrier. Basically, we were putting it behind a kind of a login system. Some of it was free, some of it was paid for, and the problem is small business owners, that's a bit difficult for them because it's another system to learn and everything like that. And I had this idea of this open access model, but I just didn't have time to produce the content. And what I've suddenly realized is that AI can help me deliver that vision. I can deliver what business owners want, open access, and I can produce 3 bits of content in a week. And now, before AI, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So what I'll do is, I think next week's blog post is about changes to apprenticeships. And what I've done is I've gone off and I found some information about that. I've asked a GPT to basically undertake something called deep research, where it will go off and it will think for maybe 10 minutes, and it will go out into the web and it will find information, and it will help me produce a load of research. I think people underestimate a good quality blog post will take you hours to write. They will literally take you hours to write. I've written kind of a very in-depth article that's on the blog about inheritance tax and how it's affecting farming, and I use the Lake District as an example. That's a really complex blog post to write because you have to understand some of the intricacies of the farming industry, which I happen to know about because of my teaching at Northumbria University. I've taught responsible innovation, so I've done a lot of work with kind of looking at how farming works and how innovation has affected farming. And Lake District farming was one of the things that I did quite a lot of reading on. But a GPT can help me bring those ideas together really, really quickly. And it could, an article like that could take me maybe 5 hours to go from I'm starting to write it to actually finishing it. Now I can reduce that time to maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours. And that includes publishing it onto the blog, turning it into an audio file using my voice clone, or the not quite Justin's voice clone. But it's allowing me to rapidly prototype things. Like today, when I've finished recording the podcast, I'm literally going to go into Auphonic. I will drop this file in there. It will master it. It will put my intro and outro on it automatically for me, and it'll give me a file that is just ready to go. It's saving me loads and loads of time. So what I can actually focus on is sat here recording you a 25-minute podcast, which is no problem because I know the admin after doing the podcast is going to be relatively minimal. So I think the key takeaway here is do not fear AI. Fear not using it because your competitors are. I'm using it, and I'm producing an education business that can produce 3 bits of bespoke content every single week, just like you're listening to now. And yes, it is me. I've spent the time recording it, but 18 months ago, I'm not sure I could have delivered this model for my education business, whereas I can now. Look, these are my closing thoughts on it. Is business owners, they don't need to become AI experts. They just need to understand how to train, tune, and integrate AI into real workflows ultimately. And the key kind of places where you're going to get serious about this is go pay for your own GPT, subscription. Build your own custom model, train it on your own real materials like your internal staff manuals, training manuals. If you've got a technical product, feed it with that technical product stuff. Feed it with examples of things where things have worked and not worked within your organization, and then start using it to write and serve your clients much better. This isn't the future. This is now. And the businesses that are going to embrace this today will be the ones that everyone else is trying to catch up with tomorrow. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Ask JT podcast. Subscribe for a weekly episode, and if you found this useful, share it with a fellow business owner who might benefit.